Welcome back to the Virtual CISO Happy Hour. I'm Rick Live. I'm your host. This week I have Joe Bruffy and I have Clayton Smith, one of our exchange administrators, with us as panelists. And the topic this week is phishing, everybody's favorite topic. So, there's been a lot of things said about phishing. It's still, unfortunately, the most effective hack tool out there in the world. I mean, granted, a couple of years ago, we were at 20% phish rate. This year, we're, I think, 5% phish rate is the average. I still think 5% is a little low, in my opinion. But, 5% is still a big hole in your firewall. I mean, your human firewall is a killer. So I'm going to let Joe introduce himself and let Clayton introduce himself and give you a little background on it, guys. Go ahead, Joe.
Hey, I'm Joe Bruffy. I'm the lead security engineer and architect for Access Point Consulting. I manage the email team, the security team, and manage the strategy.
Clayton?
I'm Clayton Smith. I am the Senior Exchange Administrator for Access Point. My job is to manage the email systems, but manage them from a security perspective, and most of that focuses around topics like phishing. So it's always a fun thing to do.
Awesome. I appreciate it, guys. I appreciate you taking your time out, especially at 5 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon to meet with us and have this discussion. I really appreciate it. So, Clayton, let me start off with you. Let me ask you a couple of questions here. So first off, what are the most common types of phishing attacks that you see targeting our users?
Yeah, the funniest thing is it's not the super advanced attacks that you're seeing. People make a lot of hay out of spear phishing and things like that, but the classic broadcast phishing attempts that go out to millions of people, they continue to work and people continue to use them.
Because they work. People respond to them, they click on them and whatnot. Yep, and I agree. So what are some telltale signs, Joe, in an email that can signal somebody that they're looking at a phishing email, they're not looking at something legitimate? So what are some of those telltale signs?
Well, there's lots of telltale signs, such as call to action, or trying to say there's some emergency, having links that go outside the organization, having people you don't normally talk to asking you for help. There's that's some fairly common.
You mean I shouldn't buy a bunch of Google Play cards for you?
Yeah, that's the other thing.
You can buy it for me. That's
cards and that would be amazing.
That would be amazing. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so phishing poses one of the most prevalent cybersecurity threats to any organization, in my opinion. Now, as a CISO, I've seen this for many, many, many years. I remember back, oh my Lord, back in the late 80s, early 90s, when email was just kind of starting to get around on everybody's desktop. And we would send each other jokes. And I mean, it literally started like that. And we started hoaxing each other. And I remember at this very large software company, I can't say their name, that I used to work for as a vendor, and we started doing a lot of that stuff there. We actually got the CEO to join in on some of that, which is interesting considering who the CEO was. Anyhow, so Joe, talk to me about how do you secure some of our users? What kind of training do you use? What kind of training do you feel is effective for our users, or what technology is effective to help us against phishing?
Sure, there's lots of different compliance platforms and whatnot that you can use, such as KnowBe4. Proofpoint has their own flavor, so does Microsoft. Or you can send out test messages and really get people to understand that hey, you clicked on this. It's better if they click on my phish email than a real one. There's lots of ways to defend against it as well, as far as brand protection, but that's more on the outbound.
Okay.
But yeah, user awareness is probably your largest tool that you're going to have.
And Clayton, would you agree with that the user education is the most important tool?
Absolutely. I mean, you can have the latest and greatest tools, you can have the latest and greatest teams, but you're never going to hit 100%. And that user education, even if it's at a basic level, telling people that if somebody's trying to trick you emotionally into doing something, it's just great, and that's your last line of defense, and often it's your best line of defense.
Yeah, the sense of urgency always. Yep. Or do you take an action? Mm-hmm. So does our email security software detect and filter out any phishing emails before they reach users?
Tons and tons and tons. A substantial portion of traffic, along with spam and other unwanted, but it's comprising a greater and greater amount of traffic while legitimate traffic dwindles.
Okay, awesome. So this week during the happy hour, we were doing something slightly different because it is actually after 5 p.m. Well, we are going to say thank you very much, Clayton, for showing up, and I appreciate it. You too, Joe. And for everyone out there,
Yeah.
have a shot on me.
Yeah.
We don't normally drink on this show, but hey, it is a happy hour, and the
I
ownership
didn't
told us
get
to do
this
it.
memo. I have nothing. I'm a little
What?
disappointed.
Well, you obviously filtered it out in your email. I mean, we did
I
send
did.
it out.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So anyhow, so Clayton, tell me some of the platforms that enterprises can use, or some of the tricks that enterprises can use to filter out some of this email. You know, the junkware, the garbageware, the malware that comes in through email. How do some of the organizations filter the stuff out?
I think a lot of people are out. They want to go. They want to buy the latest greatest tools. They want to go spend a bunch of money. Even if you're a basic Microsoft customer and you put in something as simple as a banner saying this is originated from an outside the organization. Very, very easy, free stuff. Things like email rules saying, hey, if it has our domain and didn't originate from our domain or from our tenant, block it. Very, very simple stuff. Any vendor is going to have more and more complicated tools, but I really think really knowing the tools you have, setting them up properly, and really spending the time with them is the best thing you can do. I mean,
Okay.
every single tool has different little bits and bobs, but knowing the tool, understanding the tool, feeding that back into your threat modeling is really the best thing you can do.
So would you say that how would you use DMARC authentication? So I've tried to take these discussions just a little bit more technical than we've been in the past. So I'd like to actually start talking a little bit about DNS, DMARC, et cetera. So Clayton, can you walk us through what is the point of email security through DNS? How can we protect ourselves or organizations with DNS records in any way, shape, or form? Explain what a DMARC is,
Sure.
et cetera.
So, if you think about email, just backing up a little bit, email is a technology that's been built on over what, 30 some odd years now. So you started off with this very basic messaging where you had very implicit trust. And we're where we're at now, where anybody can stand up an email server and try to send as any organization in the world. I can try to send as Microsoft. So what we do now is you have a couple of different records you can put in your DNS. Number one, we'll start with the basic is Standard Protection Framework. It's SPF record. It says that, hey, I use this email vendor to send emails, or I send emails from this IP address. If you don't see the email originating from one of these sources, please disregard it. That's really the most basic thing you can do, I think, right now, as far as DNS records. You plop that in there, and that informs your sender that maybe this email is not legitimate. Very easy to do, quick Google search to tell you how to do it. Email, or if you're a Microsoft customer, a nice click through, even connects with your DNS, tells you exactly how to do it, puts records in there for you. From there you can move on to DKIM signing, which is really just a cryptographic key that you're signing your email messages with. Um, so when it goes out of your email server, outbound, signs it with that key, and then you have a DNS record saying, hey, if this message doesn't match this public key, this message is not legitimate. Again, and it just tells the sender to disregard that. So all that rolls into the DMARC record. And there's a couple of different pieces there, but fundamentally it says you can kind of authenticate with an SPF, you can authenticate with a DKIM record, but the DMARC record is going to tell your recipient what to do with that email. So if your DMARC record, like in some of our clients, says reject, it means we have a very good grasp of where our email comes from, what services we're using, and if it doesn't come from one of the services that the client says it comes from, get rid of it. That's it in a nutshell. I mean, you can get into a whole lot of other stuff like macros and that kind of thing in your SPF record if you have very complex email setups. But for a lot of people, taking, say, an hour and setting up those basic things will just do absolute wonders for not only them, but their partners as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I can't agree more. I can't possibly agree more. That enabling MFA for users before they can even get to their email, when they actually access their email, that's always helpful too, in my opinion. So Joe, how do you test? How do you ensure that your email systems are secure, or how do you ensure phishing can't get through? What kind of external pen testing do you do? What kind of testing do we do? How do we know that our efforts are effective?
Well, I mean, you can see how many emails have been rejected. If you set up with DMARC and you have a provider, you can actually see where if somebody's spoofing your domain. Another thing you can do is obviously, you can do regular pen tests. You can also send out, uh, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the biggest things
Yeah.
that you can.
You
So trying
hammer
to
on it
connect
until you
SMT.
figure out how to break it. I mean, honestly, that's
Yeah,
it.
that's a lot of everything. That's hammering on until you break it. But the thing is I mean, DMARC's not for inbound email except if somebody has it set up for their
Right.
domain.
Yeah.
So while that will protect people or our brand, and that's a big thing. If somebody spoofs, somebody's brand, they can lose a lot of money due
Yeah.
to the loss of faith and
Reputation.
trust. Yeah, yeah, exactly. If your reputation's shot, it doesn't do you much good to be very good at phishing.
But in our
Yeah.
day to day doing work with Access Point and the various clients, when we work with them on a partner for one of the clients that's been compromised, that partner is their brand is seriously damaged for a very long time, and so having the stuff set up really helps prevent that.
So how do you monitor for suspicious activity, Clayton?
Lots and lots of alerts first off, but these days that doesn't get you very far. If you're a human responding to alerts, you're wasting valuable time. So
Yeah.
with us, we use any kind of automated tooling we can, and that really goes back to understanding your tools. So any kind of automated defense response, pulling the email, and then alerting your team for further investigation. I'd say that gets you probably 80% of the way there. Because I mean, you're going to have stuff that comes in, it's benign, it doesn't look like anything, and then an hour later, hey, that link's malicious. It's going to the latest, malware with a 0 day on it.
Yeah.
So any kind of automated tooling you can put in place, then alerting your team, that's how you win on that.
And as a CISO, one of the things that I always like to talk to end users about is making sure they've got a reporting mechanism. So if something does come through to the end user, they've got a way to let the
Absolutely.
email administrator know that something came through that it smells funny, tastes funny, whatever. They don't want to open it. Having that reporting mechanism, in my opinion, as a CISO, is critical. So, do you disagree with that, Joe?
Not at all. It's definitely critical. There's every platform has their own flavor of it. Making sure that you can have one that can do as many kinds of reporting as possible, because there's phishing, there's malware, there's spam, there's lots of different things. I mean, not every bad email is a phish. Not every fish is you know spam or whatever. Like it's not
I have written a lot
usually.
of bad emails in my lifetime. I understand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, and then having AI. I mean, AI is being leveraged a lot in machine learning,
Yeah.
and some new tools, like Darktrace and Proofpoint, for example, use machine learning in the back end. So they'll even bounce messages against that repeatedly and recheck it in the future. As emails are sent in. So if you report it, say for Proofpoint, it'll actually send it in. They'll automatically check it. If it's undetermined, they'll have an analyst look at it,
Mhm.
and then if it turns out to be a fish, they add that to their data, and then they'll rerun all the emails in the last day or two, and they'll even pull the emails for you. That
Yeah.
That's an amazing thing.
yeah, it's and there's other vendors that do that as well. As I mean, even Mimecast and Darktrace and probably every other major vendor out there has a way to pull an email automatically.
So let's talk a little deeper, Clayton. So when you're the email administrator for a very large organization, and as such, you have privileged access, you have privileged identity management access, you've got privileged account management access, you've got service accounts that you have to manage, et cetera. How would you recommend it to another administrator, maybe somebody younger, up and coming, or an organization that's younger organization? How would you advise that they manage their limit their privileges? How would you advise, or what would you advise around excuse me, permission privileges? Wow, I really spit that one out bad. Let's start that one over. So,
You know,
how would you limit the
good.
privileges, or how would you recommend limiting privileges?
So, especially with a new organization, you're moving so fast. The thing is, like, let's get this account stood up. We'll give it to this guy. This guy has godlike powers. And honestly, across an organization, stop that. Take 5 minutes and say, okay, who needs what? And again, I know I'm harping on this. understand your tools, what
Yeah.
roles do what. And so you have your break glass accounts, in case something happens, you have your account with these godlike powers. But for me, day to day, one of the regular conversations I have is I don't need this anymore. Get rid of it because I don't want to
Yeah.
be a big target on somebody's radar. So when you're an up and coming organization, or if you're a younger person, what are you trying to say? You trying to say I'm not young anymore? But just really limiting that to what you do day to day. If you do something once a week, cool, pim into it. Or if this is a once a month task, use your break glass, something like that. But minimize that attack surface that you have personally. And the biggest challenge there is everybody kind of wants to accumulate power. They want to be able to just reach in and do something in an instant. And especially for a young organization, overcoming that's a challenge.
So let's talk about that for a second. So and let's get all the technology. Let's get into people's side because honestly, as the three of us know, technology is easy, right? It is. It's just easy. It does what you tell it to do. It's stupid. It's dumb. It only does what it's told to do, right? Humans are the hard part, right? So how do you deal with a user, or how would you recommend dealing with a younger organization where the CFO comes in and says, "I don't give a crap. I pay the bills. I want access. I need it right now to everything, whatever everything is." How do you deal with that? Like specifically around email, what do you how do you educate these people that this is not the right approach?
So, fundamentally, if I'm coming in as a contractor, if they absolutely demand it, hey, that's what it is. They're going to sign a letter with just detailing the risk.
Yep.
That's going to go in a safe somewhere, and that covers me, right? But the bigger thing is, and you want to build long term partnerships, so you don't
Yes.
want to go to war with someone,
Absolutely.
but you want to tell someone, hey, I see you on LinkedIn as the CIO of this organization. If I see you with a 30-second search and with some other information here, I can put together a very basic dossier on you. What do you think an attacker is going to do? They're going to come gunning for you. Well, if you don't have this access and you can work with us, develop a process to get the information you need, you're making yourself a much smaller target. You're making your organization a much smaller target. And I mean, these days when all it takes is 1 0 day and a click, anybody you can work with like that to minimize their attack surface, especially at the C-suite, especially at the VIP level. I mean, that's worth really however much time you want to dump into it because it pays such big dividends.
Okay. And how do you identify all your users that are attacked with phishing emails, for say? So if you're checking your system, how do you know who's been attacked? Do we have any mechanisms to know that Joe or Rick were attacked last week or yesterday or today? Do we have any mechanisms like such as that?
So that gets into your tools. Whatever tool you want to use, Mimecast has it, Barracuda, Defender. They all have different ways of doing that. They all have pretty graphs. You can go and look at any of those pretty graphs, and it'll tell you over the past time period. Hey, this person was attacked by credential theft emails, or maybe they're being targeted specifically by malware. Any tool can tell you that. And so that's not even the biggest part of it. The biggest part of it is how do you feed that back into, again, your threat modeling? Who are you giving that information to? Because if I'm sitting here looking at a graph, that means nothing to me. It means, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to pay attention to this person's emails a little more. But am I feeding this back into your patching folks, all of your threat folks, so that they can go and say, hey, this person's using Adobe of this version. We've got this malware email coming in targeting this CVE. That's where you're making a difference, and any tool can tell it to you.
So how close do you work with threat hunters every day?
Um, on the client that I work with the most for APT, we have one of the chief threat hunters. I'm not going to name drop him,
No,
but
no, that's fine.
he's in our chat, and when anything interesting comes in, it is an immediate collaboration, and that's how you affect change quickly because you can't just say, okay, well, hey, we'll address this next week when you don't know if the next email is going to be a little better crafted and it slides right through.
You just hit something that I see as a CISO that is a critical vulnerability in every single organization I've ever seen, including I've worked at places like Microsoft in the past, right? I spent 5.5 years at Microsoft. And one of the biggest things I've seen in every organization is communication. And you just touched on that. And having that chat session open, having your threat hunters and your email administrators working together, that is a phenomenal thing that Access Point offers. That is fantastic.
Absolutely.
I love hearing that kind of stuff because communication, like I said, is really the biggest problem any organization's ever had. I mean, honestly.
Since the beginning of time, really.
Yeah, right. So, Joe, how do you? How often do we update our software? I mean, is that even critical? I mean, well, not just the workstations, but also the server side. Being in a cloud environment or being in a hybrid environment, how do you manage that? How do you know that your software is kept up to date, that your rules are kept up to date? How often you keep update your spam rules? How do we do these things as an engineer?
Well, so there's a lot of things, like a lot of the spam rules are fairly automatic now, but there are some, if you see certain actors or indicators of compromise, you can add that to to your list, to your block list. Say, okay, I don't want to accept emails from these IPs or from these people or with these subjects. Um, Another thing that you can do, obviously, is updating your software. So if you have your vulnerability program set up, even Microsoft has and Defender has QualiScan built in. You can get all sorts of information there. Based on that, you can then take your very attacked persons list, no matter what tool it comes from, and you can make sure that those people are updated on a regular basis. And these things aren't even that difficult to say pull the data from an API and automate those lists. So you can look at the reports and have a merge report that says, okay, we got to make sure we hit these first because these people are attacked, 3 times a day, 5 times a week, whatever it is, and you make sure to get them updated as soon as possible.
Right. And so that's on the workstation end. How often do we check our servers? I mean, honestly.
Oh, constantly. Well, it depends. So obviously on servers, you can't always update right away. There's some older legacy
Right.
software that says, okay, this is the most recent version of Java, which is the last thing I ever want to hear is that there's a version of Java that's in the environment. It'll be, okay, we can't go past the service pack, or we're end of life and we also don't develop the software anymore. That happens very often. I mean, I've even as recent as a year ago, we've had clients with machines that are, from Windows 2000 or even earlier. I saw an
Wow.
NT4 just 2 years ago. And so, obviously those haven't been patched in 17 years or 20 years,
Yeah, I remember
but
those
but they
days.
still exist. And that's where the problem comes in, is if you get a phish email and it's a 0 day on your machine. So you launch something for an internal machine for Log4j. So you send you a crafted link because they know you have Log4j, and now all of a sudden that server's compromised, and there's users that are logged in that are always administrators. That it can then spread from machine to machine, and all of a sudden they own your network. Uh,
So Clayton,
very very possible.
so my next question is to Clayton. Clayton specifically, and well, let me rephrase that. Not specifically, generically. What type of what incident response remediation steps do we take when you see a successful phishing email reaches an end user?
So that really goes back to automation first. Again, if you're moving with people, you're moving too slow, and so that's the biggest thing. You got to have, I mean, just like you have EDR on an endpoint, your email platform has to take any intelligence it gets, reach in and remediate that email immediately. And so on that side, you're erring towards false positives. If you snag an email for a few minutes, take that little bit of extra time to look at it and put it back, that's fine. That with the exception of certain very high volume automation mailboxes or something like that, you can spare a few minutes because the cost of failure is so very high.
Yeah.
From there, it's really comes down to looking at having your team look at it, verifying this is an email, okay, or this is a phishing email, feeding that back into your email system via whatever mechanism you have with your tool. Proofpoint has, they go in, they report false negatives. With Mimecast, you can go back in and report as a phishing email, report as malware. They actually do take that quite seriously. Any of the tools can do this. And so it's having that process nailed down and following it consistently. I think that's the biggest challenge that I've seen is, when you stand up a tool, you're like, okay, hey, cool, we're going to do this. And then nobody ever does it. So getting that automation and then having a consistent process with your team, the details vary, but that's what it is.
So what post incident analysis do you run or do you use to improve future phishing detection?
So with the tools that we have, a lot of it, like as Joe alluded to, it feeds back into machine learning, where they're banging these emails against the machine learning constantly. So post analysis, you go back, the biggest thing is feeding it back to that vendor so that they can run it against their machine learning. That's the biggest thing. But for a lot of the stuff you see on a day-to-day basis, is garden variety. You'll go back and say, did it come from this IP? Are we accepting emails from this geographic location? Is there some kind of consistent software being used to say generate the documents for a particular phishing campaign? And then you can often target the metadata inside of a document. And it's a degree of whack-a-mole, but if you're looking to stop a particular campaign, it's pretty effective. There's a lot of stuff you can do.
So, Joe, what, if any, gaps do you typically find in phishing defenses with companies with their or email system, whether it be cloud based or on-prem based?
Well, funny enough, you say that. Usually, most companies don't have. I mean, they're getting better at it, but they don't even have an education program for their users to even understand what it is. They don't have a reporting mechanism. They don't leverage, AI or machine learning. They're trying to do everything manually. And because, yeah, there's a lot of tools that are manual that can be effective. But if you have a lot of staff and if you're a startup, that's not going to be very effective. So selecting an email gateway that has those tools or using Azure and turning those tools on, because sometimes it's just not turned on. They have it. That's probably another big gap is configuration. Not leveraging DMARC. That is very, very underutilized. Or they utilize DMARC and they have it as accept, which means it may as well not be there. And so misconfiguration is probably the largest issue. And then, of course, not having the proper tool set after that.
And Clayton, what kind of phishing attacks are emerging that we need to prepare for?
Whew. It's funny to talk about this because some of it I don't even know how we're going to handle it yet.
This is coming from an expert who I actually believe is an expert, folks.
People talk about AI. They talk about ChatGPT, large language models. The trick with that is you're now able to take someone's mailbox, take any kind of compromised mailbox, feed it into one of those models, especially with the models that are coming with larger and larger and larger memory. You can feed so much more data into them, and then you can kick out an absolutely perfect phishing email tailored to an issue they're already aware of, and it's perfect. And for somebody like me going and looking at it, I have to look at where this link points to, what infrastructures it point to, and it's very, very difficult. The AI stuff is going to be very, very difficult to take care of, and I think the biggest thing we do is go back to our users and say, is this something you would expect? If you've had a conversation with Bob and you guys are just having a casual conversation and then Bob drops a document link on you, is this something you really expect? Because even with AI, even with whatever else comes down the pipe, consistency is the key. Is this something that you're expecting this person to be telling you? And from there, you report it. Give it to us. We'll take care of it.
And you think consistency is really the key, in my opinion. I mean, it's consistency across the tools, across the automation, across the end user training, across the enterprise as a whole. The absolute consistency of explaining what phishing is. The constant, because it's constantly evolving, right? It's not the same thing. The Nigerian prince, he died a long time ago. Yeah, yeah. Every now and then he raises his ugly head. He's resurrection, but So okay. So in the end, what would you recommend, Clayton, as the top 3 things that you would want an organization to know as an email administrator to help them block phishing, to help them identify phishing, to help them stop phishing? What are the top 3 things you would recommend?
Well, I think it's going to be a bit different, but number one is use the tools you've got. The chances are you've got things you can turn on. Just like Joe said, know and use the tools you've got. Go out and Google it even, because there's always tips and tricks, especially for a smaller organization who's not on a big budget. And also, don't just go spend a bunch of money without knowing how to turn it all on. Engage.
Thank you. That's where I was going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Engage with experts, even if it costs you a little bit of money in a budget strapped environment. Buy a few hours, talk to somebody who can give you that initial push, get you started. I mean, a lot of times when you have a tool that comes with your stand up, take advantage of it. And I think we've hammered on this a lot, but the final one is education, education, education. Your users are your final line of defense. If that line of defense consistently fails, it may as well not be there because the technology is never going to be perfect. Now or 20 years from now, your users are your last line of defense. Train them well.
Train them well. That's very good. That's very good advice there, Clayton. Clayton, honestly, it really is. Because that's my advice to everyone, right? My advice is I don't care how much you invest. It doesn't matter to me. You're never going to stop it all. You're not. The only way to catch phishing emails is to educate your users. And then not only just tell them what it is, but what do they do with that email? I've seen organization after organization after organization, somebody will get a phishing email and they'll send it to everybody. Hey, look here, guys, look out for this email. And now they've just propagated, this phishing email, this attack 100-fold internal to the organization. That's brutally
We deal with
tough.
that every day, every single day.
Yes, and that's tough. Joe, what 3 to 5 things would you want an organization to understand about email and phishing, and how to maybe block it, or how to avoid it, or how to recognize it, what to do with it? What would you offer, Joe, as your last 3 to 5 things you want people to know?
Well, I think configuration is going to be the ongoing thing today. If your solution's not configured, it's not complete. I mean, you could spend all the money in the world, like, oh, I bought these tools, I don't have to do anything. It's like, well, no, you have to manage the tools. Making sure you audit, your tools on a regular basis. Make sure that the configuration is correct, or that if there's a better best practice, because that does change. Like, it used to be better to do X, now it's better to do Y kind of scenario.
Yeah.
Another thing is, if possible, utilize machine learning and automation. You
How
can
would
not move
somebody
faster
do
than
that? I'm going to interrupt you for a second, Joe. How would somebody use AI or machine learning? What specifically, or close to specifics, can you give our listeners?
Oh, there's a few things. So there's lots of tools that have it built in. So Proofpoint has their own engine. Darktrace has Antigena. You have Mimecast has their own setup. And those do a lot of the stuff for you. Now, the one thing that it doesn't do for you, so Antigena has a specific thing where you can build different models yourself, and learning how to build those models, so you're not just on a stock configuration. Yeah, so if your threat models are all stock, somebody will know how to get around them potentially, because they'll know, okay, if I start
About
doing
2
5 at a
seconds.
time, but I do it too many days in a row, it's going to be a problem. So I'll just stutter here and there, and they can go undetected because they'll know that, okay, this is a standard place, or they can sit on the user's machine and say, okay, I've seen the behaviors, now I'm going to get around that. So I mean, there's plus and minuses to it. I mean, you still need threat hunters, you still need people.
That's where I was going with that specifically. You've got to have your people trained.
Yeah,
You've got to have the right staff, the right skill sets.
Yeah, because people discovered it, people built it, and it's built on models that are known. So if you take and you feed it information, okay, these are the different scams. Which is really what it comes down to, is it's all 2,000-year-old scams. I mean, none of these are new. And the closest thing to do is they use the gift cards now, but whatever, that's not the point. But we know what those are. If somebody comes up with a new scam or new angle on that scam, you're just not going to see it. So you need to look for it. You need to say, okay, what would I do? What data is here, and how would I use that, to infiltrate this company? And if it's not in the models, they're not going to catch it. Now,
Right.
it gets down to also sometimes 3 lows is a high, but that's another thing to have threat hunters look at. What's the cadence? What's the normal?
Yeah. So for the end users, I would recommend it, enforcing MFA, plain and simple, getting into the email system, getting the system. That's just basic
Absolutely.
101. And even though MFA, as a
MFA.
CISO, I can get around MFA. I know how to steal an authenticated cookie, but not very many people know how to do that. I probably shouldn't say that out loud. how to do that. But investing in the right technologies, educating your employees, prioritizing your privileged accounts, your system, your service accounts, and reporting suspicious emails. Those are my 5 top things as a system that I try to look at, try to educate folks on. So awesome.
Yeah,
Any closing?
passkeys.
Yeah, passkeys are cool. Passkeys are up and coming.
Yeah.
Yes, they are. Absolutely.
One of the last closing statements I wanted to say, when you're doing these phishing education training and you're working with your users, it cannot be a punitive thing. You can't take your users and beat them over the head if they fail the first phishing email they've ever seen. Uh, those campaigns, it is a learning exercise. Go to your users. Hey, here's what you did. Here's what we're seeing. You're not trying to make them feel dumb. The communication line to them is, here's what we're seeing. We want to know how everyone responds so that we can better arm ourselves. A lot of organizations I've with really throughout my career, you fail a phishing test, you get beat over the head. Don't do that. Make it an educational experience. Make it a positive experience. And make sure your users are comfortable coming to you when they think they may have clicked something. Because if they think it's a test and they think they're going to get, chastised or quote unquote beat over the head, you've lost a valuable intelligence stream. So I really just wanted to close with that, and out there for every organization that's watching.
Yeah. I've worked for a organization that deals with prisons and jails, and they actually bonus people for showing up and saying, "Hey, look, I found this," and which was great.
That's the thing.
It about killed the IT staff some days, which is fine, because I don't know a single IT guy, I don't know a single email person, a single CISO that won't stop and drop everything to look at an email if there's a potential issue. I don't know anybody would say, you know what, I don't have time for that. I really don't. So the culture, as Clayton's alluding to, needs to be positive. It needs to be you need to reprimand people, particularly if they're consistently a problem. If they're consistently just ignoring it. And I'll say this, I won't say the salesperson's name, but I know a sales guy that will click on absolutely any email you send him. He will open everything, every link. He does not care because there's a buck at the end of that. There's $1 at the end of that chain, right? And he'll do it. That person needs to be properly managed. Let me rephrase that. Rather than disciplined, properly managed, right? You set their expectations that, if you consistently do this and you don't follow company protocol, that there will be repercussions. However, to Clayton's point, it has to be a positive environment until you get that person just says, I don't care anymore. I'm going to click everything.
There's also one more thing you can do with that. So users that are heavy clickers or very attacked, you could actually put them into an isolation environment. So when they click on the email, it's actually executing on a remote machine. So it doesn't have to be for everyone. It can be controlled, even automatically with some systems. And there's a few that I've seen, a few different vendors that will do that. But
awesome.
Leverage your tools.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize if you have Proofpoint, you have isolation for VAPs, for very attacked persons. And a lot of people don't ever set it up.
He's been beating us up with just know your tools, know your tools, know your tools. And actually, he's absolutely 100% correct, folks. He really is. Know the tools that you have. You probably have the solution and may or may not realize it. So again, Clayton, Joe, I appreciate everything, guys. Thank you very much. Hope everybody has a good evening. Folks out there listening, these guys are awesome. I've worked with these guys for a long time, and they are phenomenal. Hopefully, we'll have Clayton back on at some point in the future and Joe back on as well. So thank you very much, folks. Have a good evening.
Yeah, thank you.